Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Pursuing Leadership Mastery. My name is Steve Andre, former Texas Band Director Administrator and a Managing Director of the Servant Leadership Association for Music. And joining me is my good friend, Texas Bandmaster of the Year and Conn Selmer Senior Educational Clinician, Frank Troyka. Hey, Frank, how are you today?
Hey, Steve. Great to be back again this week. This week, I'm excited because we're going to focus on some of the things that I kind of come into contact with as I get to work with a number of bands around the state and around the country. And that is how you approach having a small or a young band, an inexperienced band with maybe not a lot of older kids to step into those leadership roles, and how you kind of build that culture and go about creating, the building blocks that have some very long-term impact and long-term promise to them. And joining us tonight, one of the band programs I came into contact with this past year is a brand new band program up in the Frisco School District, just starting out its first year of existence, no seniors, and it's a relatively small band. Well, yeah, not relatively small, it's a pretty small group, but I was blown away with the speed with which they were able to bring things together and to kind of create a unified culture. So joining us tonight are the two band directors at Panther Creek High School in Frisco. We have Kent Wallace, the director of bands, and his assistant, Jaden Bernal. Jaden is a second-year teacher, just finishing his second year. So we got to get over that 3-year hump, and then you're good to go, Jaden. Kent, how long have you been teaching now?
This is year 7.
So you're still kind of wet behind the ears a little bit, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. I have no false notions that I'm still very new at all this.
Yeah. Well, Kent, tell us about the band program. How many kids do you have? What's the instrumentation like? A little bit of background.
Sure. So for the full band program, we have about currently 63 winds, brass, percussion, and color guard. In the marching show, we did not march everybody. It was really important to us that in year 1, we established our alternate system. And so we had about 40 winds on the field, 5 battery, 6 guard, and 6 front ensemble. So very small ensemble, even for a 4A. Most of the groups we were going up against were a lot bigger than us. So that was kind of the makeup of the ensemble here in year 1. For concert band classes, we have 2 concert bands, and we just lucked out, and it happened that we have mostly pretty good instrumentation, like normal instrumentation. The ensembles are just small. Our upper group, our varsity ensemble, has about 27 winds in it, and our non-varsity ensemble has about 25 winds in it. And the only really strange instrumentation issues that we have are that we have just 1 trumpet in the varsity ensemble, and man, that kid's playing. And then in our non-varsity,
he's a freshman, right?
He's amazing. Yes.
Yeah, well, freshman though as well, right?
Yeah. Well, he comes from he's the youngest of 5, and they're like a band family. They're amazing. We love them. Older brother was the drum major. So he's incredible. So older brother will be a senior, younger brother's going to be a sophomore next year. Looking forward to them. Only weird instrumentation in the lower group is no percussion. So our percussionists from the upper group have had to double and play all of that music, and that's its own set of issues. And no trombones in the non-varsity ensemble. So we've had to cover that with tenor sax, and we had 3 bassoons in that band. So they did a lot of things. Yeah. So
interesting that you got 3 bassoons and no trombones.
What's up with that? Well, 6 bassoons in the whole band. They're like 10% of the
oh my gosh,
of the band program. It's wild.
We used to joke in my situation before I retired that if you found a bassoon player in our band hall, you're actually more likely to find a unicorn than a bassoon player. And here you've got, 10% of your band. That's just amazing. So what the challenges then, of course, are how are you going to, well, first of all, how do you create some sort of identity? Now, I know that the kids came from 2 band programs where they were rezoned to your new school, right? Can you tell us a little about that and what their backgrounds were, and maybe what challenges that presented in bringing that identity with them to a new situation?
Sure. So we received students from Lone Star High School and Memorial High School, and both programs have a great deal of history and excellence. The band directors over there, Mr. Poole and Mr. Nietzsche, are fantastic individuals, and they both run really great programs. And so that, I mean, you're spot on. That was one of the largest challenges, is taking those two programs, combining the students, and also we had students coming up from Trent Middle School and over from Stafford Middle School, and combining them all together. So I would say that the greatest challenge with all of that was really just kind of unifying the language that we were using with the students. At Lone Star Memorial, the students are very well taught. I mean, obviously at Lone Star, when we started last semester, just even a year before that, many of those students, well, every single student who was from the Lone Star Band was at the state marching contest. So it's like they have very high expectations. The Memorial students have had a lot of success in the past. And so kind of unifying that culture, unifying the language was sort of our first, one of the very first things that we were trying to accomplish. Like, how do we stand? What are the commands that we use when we talk about certain concepts? Are those things well defined, like the shape of the leg, posture, how we hold the instruments, all of those things, the specific fundamental musical exercises that we would use, all of that, were we trying to unify it and explain it well enough that the students who we got were able to take all the things that they knew and kind of just transplant it onto this brand new thing that was hopefully well defined for them.
Can we back up just, yeah, go ahead, Jaden, jump in.
Yeah, and I think going off of what Kent said, one of the most important parts about that language is that we made it ours. Like we talked about, this is the way we do things in the Panther Creek Band. This is how we're going to look. This is how we are going to sound. So even the small details about creating like a connection to just us, even though we were young, was super important. And I think that helped a part of the buy-in. Like the Panther Creek Band is going to look and sound a certain way. And I think they, found a home and connection in just the small details of the language like that. And I think that really brought us far in creating the buy-in and be like, oh yeah, despite what we did at Lone Star and Memorial, we set a high level of expectation for them, and they met that. And because of those things that, like Kent said, and I think that's where our success came from for sure.
A quick question for Ken and Frank, and I'm sorry if I'm stealing something you're on your list, but what activities did you guys do to build the culture and get those student leaders to buy in? Maybe how did we do the leadership process, and then how do we set up, our mission statement and our goals for the year and things like that? And what activities did you guys specifically do to create that?
Sure. So the whole leadership process really kind of started back before I had hired any other staff members. I was hired in January, and I don't think we brought on Jaden until Jaden. When did you get hired?
I think everything was final like in April.
So
much legwork at that point, and I was just kind of adding on at that point.
So I wanted to do leadership interviews and have that process set by the end of April. Because I was doing double duty. I was the assistant band director at Heritage High School just up the street. And so I had to have all of that set and squared away before we had our very first like meet and greet camp together in early May. And so I just had to think, and I consulted a lot of my mentors. I had to think about what we wanted a leader to look like. And in the Panther Creek Band, and just how I view leadership, and a lot of this is influenced by Jason Pacifica, my mentor over at Heritage High School, like servant leadership has to be the deal. Like when a student signs up to be a leader or to put themselves out there to go through the interview process and the application process, it's not because they feel like they're entitled to the position, or because it's going to look great on a resume, or whatever, you list all the self-serving reasons. It's because they want to serve the ensemble. They feel like the band program has given something to them, and they have a specific set of skills and a desire to serve their teammates around them in such a way because of how impactful this experience has been for them. Now, does it also happen to look great on a resume? Does it also happen to do a lot of cool other ancillary things? Absolutely. But primarily, first and foremost, it has to be about serving the ensemble. So when I was crafting the leadership interview document and like all of the things that they were going to submit, I was like, how do I need to structure this? And how do I need to talk about this document so that we get the right kids to interview in the first place?
Yeah.
And it just so happened that the students who interviewed, they all met that criteria. And we were really proud of the buy-in that we received from these students in their first year, and the high degree of proficiency that they already had, high levels of emotional intelligence to be able to handle sections at a brand new school.
So did any of these kids have previous formal leadership experience in the bands they came from?
Two of them did. We have two students, one whose name is Chase. He ended up being our brass captain this past year. And then the other one, and he's a junior right now, so he was a sophomore section leader back at Memorial High School, euphonium player, amazing musician, because of course. And then the other one was our drum major. His name is Seth. He's a clarinet player, and he came from the Lone Star High School band, and he was a sophomore section leader last year.
So you mentioned that the kids brought a high level of enthusiasm with them and passion, emotion. I think you've said something that I kind of interpret as emotional maturity. So you were fortunate enough then maybe to have more qualified leaders than you had positions for. Is that accurate or not?
More or less. I think Jaden, do you remember how many ended up actually interviewing for the positions?
Maybe about 15 or 20, something like that.
I think there were only a few students who ended up ultimately not being, it was like maybe 3 or 4 total who interviewed, who ended up not being selected for the position. But it wasn't because we didn't think that they would be great. It was just because there were a few areas that we wanted to see them continue to improve before we really felt comfortable bringing them in on the leadership team. And most of them, maybe all of them who interviewed last year for a leadership position, we just kind of wrapped everything up. They're going to be on the leadership team this next year. So it's like we were pretty, the areas of growth that we wanted to see, we were pretty strategic about kind of fostering that growth and letting them know, like being transparent about what the ways that we want to see them grow, so that in a year's time, they've had the time to kind of prep themselves and think about it, and they kind of have their eyes on the prize for that growth. And now they're ready. And so they'll be on the leadership team this upcoming season.
So were there any sections that didn't have designated section leaders this past fall?
Yes, we did not have a designated saxophone section leader. So we had 2 clarinet section leaders and a flute section leader, but they really kind of operated more like generic woodwind section leaders. Like one of the clarinet section leaders was always with the saxophones and the low reeds. And then we had generic high brass section leaders with a couple mellophones who were really strong. And they helped with the trumpets. We just had 5 trumpets in the program this past year. So one of them kind of tackled that. And then we had a generic low brass section leader and brass captain with Chase, and he took care of all of the trombones, euphoniums, and the sousaphones.
So in terms of just going back to the beginning of all this now, once you started to get to know the kids and you started to see what they were capable of and started to, because obviously you can't really plan for too much until you know what you're gonna work with. What were some things that you identified? There were changes and things you felt like you could implement immediately versus the things that you knew you were going to have to kind of do incrementally or be much more long range in terms of pursuing those goals?
Musically, we really just tried to keep things super simple. With the youth of the ensemble, we were just a young group, so there was a lot of tone quality development that needed to happen. And so we tried to just be really super specific with our music fundamental exercises, in every way possible to try to get them, just improved a little bit so that we could be a little bit more functional with the marching show music. And we tried to be really strategic about the exercises that we would use that would help us improve the marching show music so that the kids could ultimately be competitive and continue to grow. Mr. Bernal, do you want to take some of that?
Yeah, sure. And with the show being, relatively simple and kind of catered to what our group could handle, that was another thing from the outset that we were dead set on, is that we're not just going to go out onto the field and do some, very simple show. Like, we wanted the kids to feel like this was a real marching show, like not a first year marching show. We were very strategic about even the theme of the show, and it kind of tied into how we took kids from different schools and kind of blended into one. So I feel like we planned very smart with the show, and even specifically, if we're going to talk specifics, even staging of our marching show. We knew we were a small ensemble and we were going to compete with, some big dogs out there. And we really had to be thoughtful about how we were going to stage ourselves on the field. And it really ended up being successful the way we did it. So I think everything was very methodical, and we picked things that we knew that we were going to be successful at. And I mean, they rose to the occasion and even surprised us with the level of achievement that they put out with the product that we gave them. So we definitely picked very smart in that sense, and it worked for us.
And I also think, if I might also add on, every decision that we made in regard to like the organization and how we wanted to run things, it was absolutely made as a team effort with the whole staff. Like, we had conversations about everything. And so it was like every little detail, every design opinion about the show, we vetted it all and we talked about it. And then we moved forward as a team together as a staff with what we thought was going to be the best first step for the program.
Were there any things you think in retrospect now that you're thinking, well, we could have done this better, or we really should have done this instead of that? Is there anything like that you, as you reflect on the past fall?
I think that's kind of tough, because I really feel like in a lot of ways, not that we were flying by the seat of our pants, but like for all of us, every day was just such a new set of challenges that we were just really trying to do our best with what we had at any given time. But honestly, I really don't like I'm thinking retrospectively about this first marching season and like how we kind of set everything up. I really don't think there is any other way that we could have done it that would have produced a better experience or better results for the students.
I've got to jump in on that, because after having seen your marching band on a couple of occasions in rehearsal and then seeing them in performance, one of the things that really shocked me, and I mean, when I say shocked, I mean that in every sense of the word, was how structured everything was, but without being oppressive in any way. Kids knew exactly what to do at any given moment. They were at standby, instruments were up, they were quiet, they understood procedures implicitly. And that just seemed to facilitate everything, because there wasn't a sense of, okay, what are we supposed to do now? Everyone sort of understood their role. And ultimately, what on the outside might look like, well, this is a very structured, maybe almost over-controlled environment, really ended up being extremely positive. And I remember just how encouraging the entire environment was. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this kind of evolved, not necessarily unintentionally, but when we saw this start to happen, we really started to encourage it as well. We have a tenor saxophone. His name is Troyka. And I don't know if it was semi-sarcastically, but like we gave a compliment to somebody, and we really try to do that too. Like, it's not all like, it can't all be doom and gloom and you suck at everything. It's like, this was awesome. You guys did a really great job with this. We've been working on this, and Leia, you've really improved in this regard. We're so proud of you, like in front of everybody. But like, Tariq started clapping for somebody, and then the whole band started clapping. And so it's like, anytime we give these like little kudos moments, the kids just instinctively like really congratulate each other, and they kind of hype the progress. So we think that that's a really positive aspect. We give them time, we give them breaks during rehearsal, and that's their opportunity to kind of have a little bit of fellowship with each other, and that allows them to get to know one another, because these kids are like really up in the trenches with one another. And so building that positive culture, that camaraderie between the kids that was really important. And I think a crucial aspect to the success that we've seen so far with our students.
Can you guys talk a little bit? I know you've had Frank in as a mentor throughout the year. Talk about the value and the importance of having a mentor in your program, somebody like Frank specifically that has that experience and all those credentials, and how much value did that bring to your program?
Mr. Bernal, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So having Frank out is not only a blast for us as teachers, because we know we're going to learn like super valuable information and just put some more tools in our toolbox. The kids have a blast too. Like our kids are very highly receptive to information because we've trained them to be that way. So, I mean, Frank was very helpful in the sense that, you know, he gave not only us as teachers, you know, tools in our toolbox, he also gives kids different things to think about when they're playing music. I mean, even if I'm talking specifically, I remember a rehearsal where, you know, Frank really got our brass to play out, because we one of the big things that we talk about in the Panther Creek Band is tone quality. Like that's our bread and butter. We're always going to make a good sound. We're never not going to do that. And we were at a point where, you know, we were making good sounds. We were playing the music, already sounding awesome. And Frank kind of helped us elevate our volume just a bit. And I mean, even the kids like saw that and felt the difference with that. So when it comes to concert band too, I mean, it's his ears are awesome, obviously. So there's just different little aspects of the music that Frank helped us kind of bring out and bring more to life, and kind of boosted the kids' confidence too. I mean, I know it comes from a genuine place, but Frank would, you know, always hype up our kids all the way through the concert season too, just because of how prepared they were, how apt their like ears were, because we've trained them in that way. So he was, you know, a huge help for not only us, but the kids. And it's cool to have Frank out. It's like, oh, Frank's out today. And the kids are like, yes. So it's been a cool thing. And I think also something personally that I think is really special is that I know Frank probably works with hundreds, if not thousands of band nerds, but he remembers our kids' names. Like, I think that's so cool. I'm like, how does he keep up with that? I feel like I would forget if I was working with that many people. But I mean, he'll ask when we meet up, like, how's this kid doing? How's this kid doing? And he'll remember them by name. And I think that's really special. It shows that he's not just there to like give feedback. Okay, bye. It's like he's invested in our program and, you know, been a part of it in that sense. And I think that's really cool. So thank you, Frank.
Well, that's very kind of you. I'm very humble and grateful over that. I mean, to be a part of what you're doing, that means a lot to me. Would you recap just for a moment? There were no seniors, right, Kent? How many juniors, how many sophomores, how many freshmen with no marching experience at all did you have last fall?
Something like, my math is probably way off because this is just off the top of my head. Something like 13 juniors, like kind of a small junior class, a handful more than that sophomores, and then probably 25 freshmen or so between woodwinds, brass, and percussion.
So about 40% of the band had no marching experience at all then, is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
That's correct. And also we had about probably about four solos throughout our marching show. And 75% of those players were freshmen. And that's something that we talked about going into the season. Like, are we okay with throwing these freshmen onto this big stage of playing a solo in our, you know, inaugural marching show? And I mean, we wouldn't have done it any other way. Like, they rose to the occasion. And I mean, the youth of our group was really young. So, I mean, if we trusted them to put them in solos to play in front of the marching band, I mean, they went above and beyond in that sense. So that was also a really cool part of our youth as well.
Kent, I remember watching the band. They didn't come off as small, mostly because of the fact that you created a smaller stage for them. So they weren't trying to fill up 100 yards by, 180 feet back. They were, could you talk to us a little bit about how you did that and how that might have contributed to the perception of the band this first year?
Sure. Well, I mean, we had no preconceived notions that we were going to come out and be like the biggest band anywhere we went. In fact, we knew as far as 4A bands are concerned, like we've done our research about the other teams in kind of our area, that we were going to be the smallest. And so we wanted to find a way to make sure that, we weren't trying to hide the fact that we were small, but we also weren't trying to draw attention to the fact that we were small. So strategically framing the ensemble with some backdrops is how we decided to do that this year. We're going to do something. We're still not going to be huge next year. We'll have, including color guard, about 97 students in the program in the fall, which is great improvement for us, but still not very big. And so we'll have other ways that we'll frame the ensemble going forward in the future. But we knew that in order to kind of focus the attention of both the audience and our adjudicators anywhere that we went, we wanted to make sure that we had a stage, so to speak. And the stage was basically, what was it, Jaden, like between the 30s, like we had like an arc of backdrops, and we were able to use the show colors. The show title was Birds of a Feather. When you look at the idea behind it was, when you look at a flock, there are lots of different birds, maybe birds from all different kinds of locations, but they're coming together to make one like brand new thing. And we took the school colors from the different programs where we were pulling students from and kind of used those in a very like vibrant primary way to highlight what we were doing. So the backdrops were these like really big yellow and blue kind of tropical bird sort of feathers. And we had the color guard in these really bright yellow costumes with these big blue swing flags. And the band's uniforms were a little bit darker, but our front sideline panels, they were these, this really bright kind of tropical, flowery, greenery sort of looking thing. So we really wanted to fill up space and focus attention without also drawing attention to the fact that the ensemble was small.
And the reason I pose this question, it ties into the leadership thing, because everything I saw you do was appropriate for the age and experience of the kids. You weren't overwhelming them. You weren't trying to play a huge band's game, either when it came to the vehicle they were performing with or the responsibilities you were giving them, you're giving your kids. So briefly, I've got two more things I'd like to touch on before we wrap things up. The first is, what specific responsibilities did you give your leaders in the rehearsals, if you can summarize that for us?
Sure. Looks like we just lost Jaden. Do we want to wait for him to get back on?
Oh, we can just keep going. That's fine.
Okay. I bet his computer died. So specific responsibilities that our leaders had in a rehearsal setting was, at the bare minimum, or from like the 40,000 foot view, we just want our leaders to set good examples. Like however we want our whole band to rehearse, how to perform, how to practice, the leadership is that to a T. So
does that extend to their skill level or simply to their character?
Definitely skill level too. We think that, not that you would be ineffective if you still have a lot of room to grow on your instrument, but we certainly think that the more proficient a student is on their instrument, the easier it is for other students to buy in as a leader. So definitely skill level was part of it for them. Other responsibilities other than just like setting a good example, rehearsing well, performing well, being a good human, obviously, like we want them to be professional. We want them to know how to interact kindly with others, how to interact with peers, how to interact with, mentors that they might have. And then, more nuts and bolts things. We did a lot of, especially when we're working visual fundamentals, we did a lot of like breakouts into sections and like, okay, section leaders, you have 5 minutes. We're reviewing this one super specific fundamental visual exercise. We need you to see every member of the ensemble or every member of your section perform this, whatever it is, like just the first step or slow backwards technique or, whatever it is. I need you to see them and give them some specific feedback based on these criteria to try to keep things as like specific as possible.
Oh, see, I love that, because again, you're giving them manageable chunks of responsibilities, things that they can do very short term, 5 minutes at a time, highly specific, focus on just these things. So the potential for achievement and success is very high because you're giving them some real specific parameters. I think that's just fantastic. So my final question now is, going into year 2 now, are there anything specifically that you're doing differently than you were doing last year?
In terms of like organizationally, how we're doing things, not that I can recall. We were pretty intentional about however we wanted to do things in year 1, organizationally, philosophically. That's really how we want it to be when the program is fully built out too. So it's just kind of right now, we're just carrying on with the plan as intended. Now, that's not to say that if we feel like something isn't working, that we would pivot and do something else. We would absolutely do that. But we really feel like we have a good foundation for how we want the program to operate. So, I mean, we'll be a little bit bigger next year. Both of our concert ensembles will be slightly larger. So, you know, the level of difficulty of the show is going up just a little bit. The level of difficulty that we'll pick for concert band is going up a little bit. But how we treat the kids, how the students treat themselves, you know, what we're doing organizationally, all of that is mostly the same going into next
Will the
year.
student leaders have any different responsibilities going into next year? Anything layered on top of what was happening in the past, or essentially the same as before?
It's going to be mostly the same. We have kind of toyed around with the idea of having specific committee chairs, like appointed positions, students who went through the leadership process, but who maybe aren't going to be section leaders, who do like a library czar, or a uniform chair, or, you know, the loading crew captain, like somebody, like giving them a chance to learn, to kind of get their feet wet with leadership and learning how to manage and learning how to delegate without fully being in a section leader position quite yet.
Well,
So that's
again,
how we're going. Yeah.
You're creating manageable responsibilities that are meaningful and that absolutely contribute to the success of the group. And again, it's all, as you said earlier, part of the whole servant leadership mission. So, yeah, well, I was just, like I said at the beginning, I was really taken aback by what I saw because of how well organized, the vision that was apparent, the way the kids were a part of that vision, and just the way everything unfolded this first year. Congratulations. If you had any advice to give to a teacher facing some of those same challenges, a very young band, maybe inexperienced or limited resources, what, in a nutshell, what advice would you give them to maximize their resources?
I would say 2 things. Well, first of all, I do understand that here in Frisco ISD, although we are a small program, we are very privileged with the level of support that we get from the district, the level of support from the community, the amount of resources that many of our students have. Not that like blanket statement, every one of our students is coming in with all these resources. That's absolutely not true. But we do understand that what we have is, you know, in a lot of ways unique. But 2 pieces of advice. First and foremost, I would just say, if you can get people out to help, contact mentors, you know, I think there are a lot of reasonable people out there, you know, who would love nothing more than to help programs, like clinicians who would be willing to come in and assist. You know, reach out to mentors, be in contact. Hey, this is how we rehearse, or this is a document that we have. Can you please review this? Here's a video of us rehearsing. Can you check this out and let me know what we could be doing better? Here's a performance. We could do some help in this regard. Do you have any feedback? So like reach out, seek help. There's so many people in the activity who, we're all teachers, and helping others, like that's what we do. So like, don't batten down the hatches. Don't make yourself small. Get out there and seek for help. And then the second thing I would say is, just like we would tell a student who is either very new on their instrument or who has a long way to go on their development, is don't try to solve all the world's problems in one day. Like, take things one little tiny baby step at a time. There's like the old cliche, how do you eat a giraffe? One bite at a time. Mm-hmm. So like, don't try to go out there and like fix all of the program's problems in day one. It's going to take planning. It's going to take progress. It's going to take incremental improvements. But if you have a plan and you go in with a clear vision and a staff who's all bought in, and you can win over the students, with your vision and with the level of excellence that you're creating, then there's nothing that you can't accomplish. Mr. Bernal?
Yes, I think my two things would be, I think building those really strong relationships with the students goes really, really far. Like that was integral in building our culture, is that we wanted the students to know that we were bought into them. Like that was big, so that they were bought into what our vision was for the program. And then secondly, and I think the thing that also kind of elevated our success was just holding the students to a high standard and making sure that they meet what we're giving them, like through rehearsal, through performance. Truly, I know it's also cliche. If you hold them to a standard, like they will meet that if you hold them to that. And I think that's something that was really important to us in our first year, was just making sure that there was a level of excellence that they felt and know that they were contributing to. And that's how we got where we are today, honestly.
Yeah, a lot of individualistic, a lot of individual performance. Like we really tried to get as molecular as we could with the students and really meet them, every single student exactly where they were at. And we even now, like we have a really good understanding of every student's deficiencies and a plan to improve them. So that would be another thing. If I had to say a third thing, just to add on to Mr. Bernal, is like really get to know your students and have a plan for them and make sure that every single one of them knows that you care about their progress and their contribution to the ensemble.
Well, our guests have been Kent Wallace and Jaden Bernal of the Panther Creek High School Band in Frisco, Texas. Thanks for joining us tonight. Steve?
Yeah, thank you guys so much. It's very interesting that you talked about this. We haven't really discussed it, but many things that you guys brought up about growing a program and building culture speak to the heart of what we were about at SLAM, building servant leadership and how directors can empower students and grow their programs. A couple of things real quick for our viewers. Opportunities that are coming up soon. The Conn Selmer Institute, June 11th through 14th in Mishawaka, Indiana. Frank will be there. Frank, you want to say anything real quick about the Conn Selmer Institute?
Well, the thing about CSI is it's an intimate gathering where everybody has access to everyone. And it's purposely designed so that everyone who attends has direct access to all these dozens and dozens of just powerful names, amazing clinicians, terrific teachers, so that those connections we've just been discussing happen very naturally. And I have the privilege of coordinating the college track. So for any college students out there, there's a promo code college50 that'll get $50 off the registration, brings it down to $99. That takes care of all of your meals and all the sessions. If you want to spend the night on campus, it's $40 a night to stay on campus in the dorms. So that's a cost-effective way to do that too. And of course, Steve, if you wouldn't mind taking your screenshot down just for a moment, let me put my contact information up on the screen so that this is how you reach me. So if there's anybody that'd like more information, please feel free to contact me at this email address, and I will get back with you immediately with whatever answers I can produce for you.
Awesome. And another event that's coming up that you want to be aware of, SLAM, Servant Leadership Association for Music, has have a 12-hour course in Charleston where it talks specifically about building culture and what the tenets are and how you can grow culture in your program, as well as help build your leadership capacity, and some all-star clinicians there as well. Go to the Servant Leadership Association for Music website to check it out, slamleadership.org. We would love to have you join us. But everybody, thank you so much. Such valuable information. It's been a pleasure. And you guys take care, and we'll talk soon. And the best to everybody who joined us today. Thank you so much.